welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I may put a few extra tidbits and details I don't cover here on the show tonight. And while you're at it, check out all the content we do have here on the channel. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit that alert button so you don't miss anything. You keep on telling your friends so we can keep growing this channel. And if you want to see this week's list, just hang out for 1 second after the intro, and I will be right back.
Notable sales.
And our first notable sale is this classic Hellboy the Fury #3, the retailer incentive edition. I believe this was a 1 in 10, but I'm not 100% on the ratio at the moment going off the top of my head because I did cover this book a long time ago, way back on Chasing Ghosts, one of those earlier episodes, because this one is a tough one to track down and does not come up all that often in any condition, let alone a 9.8, which sold this week for a big number of $1,800, which, again, seems like a lot, and it is a lot, but it is not anywhere close to the 2725 this got last May. So almost a year ago was the last time one of these sold in a 9.8, and that was the all-time high at the time. So this is actually a bit of a dip when you look at those prices, but still notable nonetheless, as it's been almost a year since one of these has come up to market. So with that, something to pay attention to, something to keep an eye on, because it's still $2,000. And it's still basically $2,000. So $1,800 is still a lot of money. But that is an interesting book. And like I said, one we do not see all that often, which is why I wanted to cover it on notable sales this week, along with one other book that you don't see very often. And this one is maybe not for everybody. It is a not suitable for work type of book, but Zombie Tramp. This is the original printing, the first run of it, going way back. Not easy to find these. This is before they went to the, they started reprinting the whole series and what have you. But this is issue 2 of 3 of that original mini series, and this bad boy came up for sale just this past week. And again, it sold for a big number, and it doesn't come up all that often, as this one sold on a best offer for $1,350. For context, this last sold in a 9.2, mind you, for $1,400 back in June of 2025. So once again, almost a year ago, but that was a graded copy. Now it was a 9.2, wasn't a 9.8. This is a raw copy. Here, it doesn't look like it's got a 9.8, but still looks like a nice copy nonetheless. Point being, still over $1,300, and that's a big number for a raw book and a big number for this book because it does not come up all that often. So 2 pretty rare books, 2 hard to find ghost level books this week that I thought were worth noting as far as notable sales go. Now, before we get to the full Hot 10 list, I want to remind all of you out there who might need supplies to use my code RENA10 over at BCW for 10% off your entire order for your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, your CGC boxes, your top loaders. Basically, any supplies you need to keep your comics or collectibles safe, including cards, pages, top loaders, like I said. You can find a product over at BCW to help you out, get those supplies, and you might as well save 10% while you're at it by using my code RENA10. That's 10% off everything. You help out the channel, you get yourself a discount, so you really have nothing to lose to do so if you need those supplies. So with that, let's get right into the list with our first book.
Number 10.
And these ones pop up every so often. This is the latest issue of Sonic the Hedgehog, issue 85. I believe it's the second issue here featuring this newer character, Sage. And this is one of those incentives that every once in a while, these things hit on the aftermarket as folks start chasing them here and there. Granted, not a ton of volume on this 1 of 15. There are only about 15 or so sold, nearing up to 20 as I was counting them up today, but it's only been on the market 2 days. So it is an indicator of maybe things to come. I'm not sure how many more might come to market, but even with those 15 sold, it's already averaging $24, which is a decent premium over that 1 in 15 ratio mark, with highs already hitting $30. So it's only number 10. It's a placeholder here at the bottom because this was a pretty weird week. I don't know if the market decided to kind of like pull back just a tiny bit because of the upcoming con season, but it was an interesting week as far as sales go, and you'll see why and what I decided to do here at the end. But before we get there, let's keep the list rolling and see what we have for you next.
Number 9.
Arnold making the news this week that he is going to be coming back as King Conan, has people looking at his first appearance. Well, not his first appearance, but the first appearance of Conan in comics. So Conan the Barbarian, #1, a classic Marvel book, one that's been around for quite some time. This, like I said, Barry Windsor Smith doing this one. I was always a big fan of Barry Windsor Smith, especially through the Valiant days personally. But here he is, classic Conan, #1, with that news that Arnold could be coming back as Conan, among other characters. He said he also might come back as Predator in The Predator, and he also might come back in Commando. Who knows what Arnold's going to be up to? But with this, yes, it's only like 10 or so sold, like about a dozen sold, but that's still a 40% increase in volume for a pretty expensive classic book like this. So that little bit of volume still is notable, which is why I had to put it here on the list, albeit pretty low on the list at #9. 40% increase is something to note, as well as a CGC 9.6 sold for over $2,500 this week. Low grade raws are about $200 to $250. Those are like good to very goods at best. So pretty well-worn copies, still getting a decent couple of $100. And also for further context, 9.0 sold for $995, and that's compared to a 9.2, which sold just last week for $861. So you look at that, a 9.2 sold for, what is that, almost $200 or $150 less than a 9.0 sold for this week. So with that news, you see the jump that could sometimes have on the market, and that little bump that Arnold coming out has given this classic Conan book. So with that, that is our #9 book. So let's keep the list rolling.
Number 8.
Here we go with our #8 book. Yes, it's that sideways third print that has fallen a few spots down the list, but still selling very well this week. This is the DC All-In Special #1, the third print cover by Nick Dragotta, showing both sides of the Trinity here, the Absolute Trinity and the OG Trinity. And with that, there was another 80 sold, which is a little bit of a dip in volume, but prices are up, with the average up 21% to $17 and highs up 17% to $35 this week. So $35 already for this third printing. Second prints are selling pretty well, but less than the third print at this point. And first prints, well, are still pretty pricey in that kind of $50 to $60 range. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about this, this sideways. I'm going to put it the right way so we can appreciate the art for what it is. I'm just not a big fan of sideways covers. It's just a thing for me. But here's what the art would look like if you turn that comic on its side. And it is pretty cool. I still think it'd be better as a wraparound, but not my call. But it is my call to put it at #8, thanks to those increases in prices. So with that, let's keep the list rolling and get to our lucky number 7.
Number 7.
Seems like it's been a while since The Ordained first was released, but issue 2 came out this week, which reminded a lot of folks to go back and grab issue 1, even though there are already, is it 3 or 4 printings? I think it's 3 printings. I think a 4th print might be on the way, but multiple printings of this. All of them selling pretty well, actually, and selling at premiums, the second and the third print as well. But I'm here to talk about the first print of #1 with The Ordained, and I'm pretty much going to focus in just on the cover A for now. So this is the Jorge Fornes cover. Awesome cover, if you ask me. But this week, thanks to the release of issue 2, a lot of folks are reminded, and we had a 154% increase in volume with over 30 sold, with the average price rising just a tad up to $14, with those highs jumping, though, up as much to $28. So I think that came with some of the differentiation when you see some of the sales for the second and third. They all look pretty close. It's just like the trade dress is kind of recolored. But that first print did get that bump up to $28 this week for that high price. So definitely something to keep an eye on as the time goes ahead, because we know Colin Farrell would be starring in a feature of this. But let's finish the miniseries first, as we've only gotten 2 issues in. But this is issue 1 doing pretty well this week, thanks to the release of issue 2 just this past Wednesday. And with that said, let's keep it rolling and check out number 6.
Number 6.
I think folks are starting to get excited. Doomsday is still a ways off, and Secret Wars even further off, but people are starting to gravitate back towards Marvel just a tad as of late, as Marvel Secret Wars #1, the original 1984 miniseries, is doing well once again. So what do we have here with this classic Zek cover? Well, this past week, it doubled in volume from the volume of last week, with over 40 sold. The average up to $30, which is a 43% increase in price, with highs hitting $50 for this #1 classic book, going back in the day. Other notable bits about this, there are a couple versions of this. You got the regular direct edition, you got the newsstand edition. There's also an error edition with a blue colored Galactus on the inside. It was kind of a printer error or just an ink thing, depending on which printer was printing this around the country at the time. But an error copy of that sold for $100 raw, just as kind of an extra little notable sale. And also for context about the direct versus newsstand, a direct edition 9.8 sold for $300. Last week it was still like 280 thereabouts, so not like a huge jump in price, but it's about $300. But a newsstand 9.8 this week sold for $700, which is a 46% increase on the cheapest copy from last week. Because last week saw a couple of sales. I think one sold for like $450. There was like a $515 and a $615, all 9.8 newsstands. So all of those underneath that $700 mark, but huge premium for a newsstand, and just something I thought was worth pointing out. So with that, Secret Wars #1 starting to move on the market once again, albeit at number 6. So with that, let's keep it rolling and check out the top half.
Number 5.
All right, back on the list from last week, we have that McFarlane cover for the Marvel Team-Up facsimile, Marvel Team-Up number 14, that facsimile edition, rising a few spots from last week with that McFarlane cover because, well, McFarlane has his fans, and they are a dedicated bunch, and they are willing to pay if need be. Granted, we had a good amount of volume last week. We had another chunk of volume this week with another 250 sold. I mean, that's down a touch in volume, but still 250 sold is a decent amount. It's the price, which is up 50% on average to $9, with highs hitting $30, which is a 50% jump from last week's high of $20. So last week, this was only averaging like 6, high of 20 on a $4 cover. This week, we're looking at 9 and 30. So you see that increase in price. And remember, at least one or two of you out there like the fact that I gave you that kind of premium context. So I'm going to do that a little bit more often where I see it fitting. And it is fitting here. So for this particular book, out of those 250 plus sales, 200 or so of them sold at a premium. So that's 80% of all of the volume sold at premium prices. Now, what am I considering premium prices at this point? I'm going $1 over cover. Why? Well, technically, it would be anything over cover would be a premium price, but I want to give that kind of a extra little buffer for some, some extra little bits, some currency conversions here and there. So extra buck. So basically anything for this book that sold $5 or more on this $3.99 cover, I considered a premium sale. So that's where you're getting that 80% mark for this book. Again, for that extra little bit of context in case you were curious, because there are still some cover price copies out there. I think even my comic shop still has some of these available, albeit for $7, which is at a premium cost, considering it's a $3.99 cover. But with that said, that is our number 5 book, and let's keep it moving and check out number 4.
Number 4.
Also moving up from the bottom of the list from last week with some more volume, we do have the new history of the DC Universe, the Dakota Incident, #1. This one-shot special has climbed up to the number 4 spot this week, thanks to some increase in prices and still a decent amount of volume. So just like the McFarlane cover book, we have a little bit of a dip in volume compared to last week's overall volume, but we're seeing more of those premium sales. So with that, another 150 plus sold, which is a good chunk of volume in and of itself. But the average is up 100% to $14. So it's a 100% increase in average price. Highs up just a little bit, up to 40. And just like the last book, for context, because there are still cover price books out there that could be picked up here or there. This is a $5.99 cover, and then $6.99 for the other variants with the cardstock covers. But basically, of that 150 plus, half of them sold at premium prices. So there again, for that context, and though that half brought that average up quite a bit, as you saw, up to $14. So very interesting how this one is selling, as there's some premium sales and cheaper sales mixing it up here and there. So still selling very well, this Dakota Incident one-shot. So that is our number 4 book, which will take us to our top 3 next.
Number 3.
And yes, that Conan news spread beyond just Conan #1, and it included King Conan #1, since that is the proposed title for the Conan sequel. Granted, that King Conan has been teased ever since Conan the Destroyer came out in the 80s. At the tail end of that movie, you remember, King Conan was teased. and we have been waiting decades. I personally have been waiting decades. I'm a big Arnold fan from back in the day, so yes, I've been waiting decades for this, and it's kind of exciting to hear it might happen, but we'll see. Anyway, King Conan #1. This is a classic book that has actually been very, very cheap the last few years. It is nowhere near the Conan the Barbarian #1 as far as pricing goes, but it is here at #3 thanks to a 700% increase in volume with over 40 sold this week. Basically, last week there was like 4, I think, sales. There's just a couple of sales last week, but with this news about King Conan coming our way at some point, possibly still. I mean, nothing's really 100% confirmed, but it drove volumes and sales on this book. Granted, only to an average of $8, because there's still a lot of $2 sales for low-grade copies of this 1979 classic Marvel book. So plenty of cheap copies to be had. Granted, not in the best shape, but they're out there. So the average of $8, highs raw of about 20. So it is an affordable book and one that a lot of people grab because of the title, and it makes sense. So with that, I also wanted to include the fact that in graded copy-wise, so if you're looking for those higher grades, what are the prices there? Well, you can get those $20 highs raw. If you get a 9.8, you're looking at $200. So it's a decent gamble if you could find a nice, clean copy. And even, well, 9.6s are only doing about $70 to $75. So it's really a target for that 9.8. But hey, you never know what you might find out there. So with that, that is our #3 book, which leaves us with 2 more coming our way. So let's not waste any time and take a look and see what they are.
#2.
The trend continues. So here we are, another week, another Image #1 hitting near the top of our Hot 10 list due to a lot of early pre-sales, selling at premium prices, and yeah, this is an interesting trend, but we'll see how this is going to continue going forward. This week's edition is Tigress Island, sort of a, I don't know if this is appropriate, but sort of a Chained Heat meets Enter the Dragon, if you will, is how I kind of looked at it. It's not everyone's a fan, and not everyone's a fan of the content or the art, but it's not meant to be for everyone. This is not meant to be a very serious title, but I enjoyed it. But this issue, 1 of 5, $4 cover, came out this week, and it's been doing well with over 500 sales that I counted up, averaging $15 already. So $15 out of the gate. Only just came out on Wednesday. Highs of $20 on covers A, B, and D. That is not the C cover, which is the polybag cover, which sells for a little bit more, but it also costs a little bit more because I think it has a $10 cover price on it because of the polybag and the not suitable for work image inside. I'll show you them all anyway. So this is the cover A, high of 20, along with highs of 24. The B, which I think is pretty cool. We get kind of like a Kill Bill vibe here, but I do like this B cover. This is the polybag C cover that gets a little bit extra, but as you can see, it does have a $9.99 cover price. And underneath that polybag cover, it's still not suitable, so I'm going to cover up the naughty bits, but you get the idea. The Chained Heat kind of vibe here, if you remember the classic late night Skinamax movie. Anyway, Tigress Island, #1, C cover. That's what we're looking at there. But there's also a D cover here as well. So all covers doing pretty well. And for that context, of the 500 plus sales that I counted up, 460 or so of them were at premium prices. So 92% of all the copies sold, at least on eBay this week, were sold at premium prices above cover. So just keep that in context as well. And meanwhile, sets of all the covers selling for about $80, which also kind of makes sense when you look at it, about 20 a piece. So with that, that is our #2 book. Strong sales, strong average out of the gate, as we've been seeing lately with these indie books, but it is not just relegated to Image. So let's see what we got next with our top book of the week.
And our #1.
Because this is another independent #1, and it is not from Image. This one is from Mad Cave. So Mad Cave coming to the top with 51. Sort of a Area 51 kind of aliens kind of play on things. But book hot right out of the gate, earning this top spot with a very brief title. I mean, then the artist, Jock, like, look at how tiny the text is there. Usually I've got like pages and pages of this Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars #1, and this taking a very little space on the screen. Anyway, this is an oversized book, mind you, so it is a little bit oversized, so the price was a little bit higher as far as the cover goes, but still 130 plus sales this week, already averaging $20. though it was only been out 2 days. Highs hitting $28 for this cover. This is the cover A. There is a B cover as well, which sells for a little bit more, as that one hit a high of $60 this week. So maybe not as easy to find that B cover. A lot of shops may not even have messed with the B cover, but there it is at a high of $60, while sets of the A and B, plenty of them sold for $50 for the pair. So also for context, that was there. And those premium sales of all the 130, almost all of them, 96% of all the copies sold on eBay this past 7-day span, going back to last Friday, have all been above cover. So 96% at premium prices. Granted, some of them might have only been just over cover, $1 here, like I said, because that's kind of where I started from, but still brought that average all the way up to $20 already. And it's only been on the shelves for 2 days, but I've got 7 days worth of sales giving me that information. And that is the premium sales, to give you that context. So let me know what you think about that extra little tidbit of detail and numbers to give you some context on some of these sales. Is it helpful? Do you like it? Do you not like it? But that is our list for this week. I don't know if we're going to be able to continue with these new number ones week in and week out, but I decided to switch things up here at the end. So I do not have a keep an eye on it segment, but I do have something interesting I think that you will like. But before we get to it, one more quick reminder: if you need shipping supplies, you can also use Renna10 for 10% off over at Gemini. So you get your Gemini comic supply mailers. You got to mail out those comics. If you're doing any sort of, comic book flipping, your Wednesday warring, you went in there, you got some of these new books this week, you're trying to sell them, you need to mail them, you need to ship them, you need supplies. Renna10 for 10% off your, shipping needs. They also have other supplies as well as bags and boards and boxes, etc. So Renna10 works at both spots. So with that said, let's get into my new little segment and see what you think about it. All right, so instead of me telling you about books that you might need to keep an eye on in the weeks ahead, this is this week's Fallout. Now, what does that mean? These are some of the books that might have been here last week that didn't make the list this week, and you may be wondering why, because they may still be selling pretty well at your shop and may be pretty tough books to track down, but why did they not make the list? So I decided, you know what? Let's do that as far as our next little end segment goes, and we're going to start off with Dork number 1, the second print. Also notice that Dork number 2 didn't make the list because FOC came after issue 1 was released. So I believe there are plenty of copies available for Dork number 2 out there to satisfy the market, because the sales just weren't there. The sales were there, but mostly still at cover price thereabouts. A few premiums, but not enough to write home about or to make the list. But going back to the second print for issue 1, why didn't this one make the list? Well, here's why. I'll give you the number breakdown right here. It basically dropped across the board. Not surprised. This tends to happen. But usually for it to make the list, once again, there has to be at least one strong rebounding thing, of whether it be an increase in volume or some bump up in price of some kind to maintain a spot on the list when I do duplicate books on the list, as you've noticed. But here we had a dip everywhere. So only 120 sold, which was a 17% drop. The average down about 21% as well, going down to $11 as copies are getting cheaper, becoming more affordable, with highs only reaching $23. So that is why Dork, that second print, didn't make the list for this week. Also not making it back on the list, we had Narco number 1, which was number 2 on our list last week. So, and Dork, I believe, was number 4 or 5. It was right there too. All these top books from last week. But why did it make it this week? This was a toughie because I did consider putting Narco number 1 back on the list because this did maintain the average price. The average did hold at about $13. However, decent drop, 37% drop in volume, going down to 190 sales, which is still a good number. It's still a good number. But putting that with the high price also coming down quite a bit to $22, it just didn't feel like it had enough to make that list for me this week. So I decided, you know what, but we still want to cover it and still want to talk about it. So that's why I decided to make this little after segment, this week's Fallout. So the fallout from last week's sales, what are we looking at now? Still averaging that $13 mark, but the volumes are down, the highs are down. It's kind of leveling off in that plateau spot. Meanwhile, that Dork kind of dropped from its plateau. Speaking of drops, we'll go for our number 1 book of last week. And I think this just had a lot to do with a massive amount of pre-sales. I mean, it was weeks this was selling at premiums before it even came out. This Nectar #1. I'm not covering all of the covers this time out. We're only going to be covering cover A because that's the context I'm going to give you. And also, I just didn't want to do all this extra work for a book that didn't make the list. So why did it not make the list? It still basically outsold a lot of other books on the list with over 400 sold. But considering where it was last week, that's still a drop. It's still a drop of a third of volume, as well as the price dropping a third of the price. The average dropped a huge amount. It was averaging $24 last week. It's only averaging $16 this week. So big drop as far as those average sale price goes, with highs also going down quite a bit to $31, where I think last week's high was 56. So drops across the board as far as volume and price goes, but still selling very well. So don't take this as it's tanked completely. It's just, this is not enough for me to maintain a spot on the hot list when we see this much red on its ledger. So I wanted to give you guys that context and do also sort of a follow-up, because I thought this information is also helpful if you're following the market to know what happened to those books that you were there last week and now they're gone. Are they completely forgotten about? No, they're not completely forgotten about. As all three books, as you saw those numbers, were strong sellers, selling volume many more so than books that even made the list for this week. But it was those drops in averages and drops in volumes, etc., is why I felt that disqualified them from making the list as hot. So with that context, hopefully you found that helpful. Hopefully you found that informative. Let me know what you think of this new little segment here at the end. And if you like it, I'll keep it around and do a little bit more Fallout if there is Fallout to cover. So with that said, I'd love to tell you to switch on over and watch the boys on the qualified next. But however, boys had some power issues. I think Joe and Jedi, even though different sides of our country, both lost power and we're having some issues, so they couldn't go live tonight. But hopefully they still will be able to cover their MegaCon. They had a whole thing planned for MegaCon, a whole special there. So don't want to waste that work that the boys put in for that. So they hopefully will able to sneak a show in some point this weekend. So keep an eye on that and keep an eye on the channel for an announcement about that when the boys know if and when they can go either live or even with a recorded show this weekend. And also come back SNS Saturday, and then Sunday you got Star Wars, and then come Monday I'll have a new Wednesday watch list, and we will start the week up anew. And at some point I'll also drop a dollar bin digging this weekend, probably on Sunday. So with all that said, still plenty more coming to the channel. So stay on board and keep up those alerts. So keep them on so you know when things are dropping, because even though we might play with the schedule now and again, content will be dropping at any given time. So with that, I'll see you all later, and take it easy. All right. Bye.